Are you a single woman who's worried about your retirement? If so, you're not alone, because single women face unique challenges when it comes to planning and preparing for their retirement. The problem is I see common mistakes over and over again when people are approaching retirement as single as opposed to married. In today's video, I'm going to share with you those biggest mistakes that I see, and I'm also going to walk you through a client case study that shows you how to identify, address, and overcome these challenges so that you can live the retirement you want. Hi everybody, I'm James Knoll, founder of Root Financial, and I'm here to teach you how to get the most out of life with your money. I got a lot of feedback on a recent video I posted a few weeks back where I walked through a case study of a married couple, and I got these responses from a lot of you of this is great, but do it for someone who's single, or hey, this is great, do I just divide these numbers in two if I'm single? Well, there's a lot to take into account when you're planning for retirement as a single person as opposed to married. So what I want to do in today's video is take the wonderful feedback you shared with me and incorporate that into a case study of a recent client I went through with this and show you how is retirement different when you're planning for it as single as opposed to married, and what planning things do you need to be aware of to take advantage of as you're approaching your own unique retirement needs. So as usual, client names and personal details, all that's been changed or extracted from this planning scenario, but I'm going to show you the actual scenario so you can see with your own eyes what are some of these planning scenarios or planning mistakes that I need to be aware of so I can avoid them. Now first, a few important things to note. Before we jump into the actual case study, I want to address some of the mistakes I see people making. Several weeks back, I posted a case study of a married couple, and someone commented, well, what if I'm single? How do I approach this? To which a few people said, oh, well, you just divide the numbers in two. That's a common mistake that I see. That's the first mistake, is people think if I'm planning for retirement as a single person, I just need to cut everything in two that would be the case for a married person. That's not necessarily the case. Yes, some expenses that you have as a married couple will be cut in half if you're single. Maybe it's food, maybe it's the number of cell phones that you have, maybe it's entertainment expenses. It's reasonable to think that those things would just be half of what they would have been for a married couple. But other things are still going to be the same. Property taxes, for example. If you're living in a home, your county doesn't care if you're married or single, they're going to want their full property tax bill. Utilities. If you're turning on lights or if you're using gas, you maybe use a little less if you're single as opposed to married, but that electricity is going to be the same to light a room, whether it's for two people or just for one. Mortgage even. If you're paying a full mortgage or rent, that's going to be a cost where, again, the landlord or the bank doesn't care if you're single or married. Yes, you can make the argument that if you're single, maybe you have a bit of a smaller place, but in general, you can't just take your expenses as a married couple and cut them in half and plan for that in your retirement. So make sure you're going through what your actual expenses will be as opposed to using an average number for a married couple and then just dividing it by two. That will really hurt your plan. Other important things to note if you're single versus married, your standard deduction is going to be cut in half. So your standard deduction when you go to file taxes is going to be half of what it would have been if you were married. So what does that mean? It means it takes less income for you to start paying taxes on income sources in retirement. Also, something unique to single people is your Social Security benefit. Because when it comes to Social Security, there's both your benefit, then there's spousal options, which if you are married for at least 10 years, you have the option of collecting, and then there's survivor options. So even if you're divorced or no longer married, you can elect a survivor benefit if your ex-spouse passes away, or maybe you're a widow. You have a survivor benefit as well. Then even your objectives are different as a single person versus a married person. With married couples, how do we protect both of our lifetimes? And sometimes you're having to plan for whatever spouse is going to live longer. Well, if you're single, it's how do we protect my lifetime and implement my objectives, and it actually creates some unique planning opportunities when you look at things from that perspective. So with that being said, let's take that information, take some of these mistakes I'm starting to uncover, and see how that's reflected in an actual client case study. So we're going to call this client Beth. And as you can see here, Beth is 63 years old, and recently Beth went through a divorce. And so now what she's doing is she had her plan, they had their projections, but life went differently than they were expecting. So now what Beth's finding herself doing is picking up some of the pieces and saying, well, how do things change now that it's not us, it's just me? So here's what we did for Beth, is we started with the understanding, of course, of where's Beth now, how old is she? And then we took a look at what does Beth have in terms of resources. Well, Beth had some checking, some savings. She had a Roth IRA, a rollover IRA, and her investment account. She also had a home. So Beth lives in Southern California where home prices are high. Her home was worth about $1.8 million, and she had a mortgage of just about $360,000 or so. So Beth has about $1.3 million in liquid assets and about $1.45 million in home equity. Now, what we really wanted to understand was, what are Beth's goals? So she had a plan, like I said, they were following it, but now life looks different. So as I talked with Beth previously, the plan was to stay in Southern California. Her husband was working and he really enjoyed work, but he was self-employed, and the nature of his work had him staying in Southern California. So what they thought they would do with their retirement is they would travel a whole bunch, but she also wanted to get out to see her children and grandchildren who had recently moved to Tennessee. So previously, that was Beth's plan. Stay where they are, travel to go see kids, and really live life with her husband. As I mentioned, life's different now. So we had a new conversation of, what now do you think things look like? What do you want your future to be like? And what she made abundantly clear was that her children and her grandchildren were the most important things to her. And what could she do to spend as much time as possible enjoying them and also experiencing the freedom of retirement? So with that being said, let's take a look at Beth's goals. Beth's first goal was to retire at 67. So she went back to work, this is about a decade or so ago, and she's 63 now, and she wants to retire at 67. Now, as we worked through a budgeting process of what might it cost to be able to live comfortably and do what you want to do, it came out to about $6,000 per month. Now, on top of that, you can see we're incorporating healthcare costs for Beth. So what's her out-of-pocket cost? What's Medicare Part B, Part D? Get a sense for what will medical coverage cost once she's in retirement. Beth also wanted to budget for a new car. So she just got a new car recently, but she's realistic in the sense that she said, this car's not going to last me forever. So what we did is we said, starting in 2030, what we're going to do is every 7 years, purchase a new car, or at least have cash available to do so. She wanted to have $35,000 available to do that. Now, Beth's family was very important to her. She has 3 grandchildren who she adores, and she wanted to make sure that they were prepared to go to college and have some of that college paid for. We worked through this, and she wanted to contribute $250 per month to each grandchild, which is $3,000 per year. Multiplied by 3, that's $9,000 per year that she also wanted to budget in to help her children, or I should say her grandchildren, save for college. And then finally, as I mentioned, Beth was in California, but she wanted to do a lot of travel, and she also wanted to get back to Tennessee quite often. So she said, I want to have as much money available to me as needed to never feel like I have to say no to going to see a recital or going to see my kids or grandkids across the country. So we worked through that, and we determined that $20,000 per year was a travel budget that would allow Beth to do that, but we're not going to do that indefinitely. Beth was realistic in the sense that she said, when I'm 80 or 85, I'm probably not traveling as much. But if I'm retiring at 67, I'd at least like this budget all the way until 77 to be able to do this. So these are the goals that Beth shared. And again, the priority to her that I heard loud and clear was, I want to spend time with children and grandchildren. Well, the next thing that I looked at was income. What was Beth's income? Well, today it's $110,000 per year, but that will only continue until Beth stops working, of course. Beth's Social Security was on the lower end. Beth had stayed home to raise the children when she was younger. So what you see here when you look at her retirement benefit, her Social Security benefit isn't as high as it would have been had she earned this $110,000 over the course of an entire career. So some pretty significant planning points here. Number one, this is what Beth's benefit is. Now what we want to compare that to is, what was her ex-spouse's full retirement age benefit? Because Beth was married to him for 10 plus years, which means even though they're not married, she still could elect a spousal benefit if it made sense. Now for that to make sense, her husband, her ex-husband's benefit would need to be at least double this or more, because a spousal benefit is 1/2 of what your spouse or ex-spouse's benefit at full retirement age would be. But the bigger planning point for Beth is her ex-husband wasn't in the greatest health anymore. And if you've been married for 10 plus years, even if you're no longer married, when your ex-spouse passes away, you're still eligible for what's called a survivor's benefit. So her ex-spouse was still living, but one of the things that we were mindful of is this is her benefit today, but if he ever passes away, then her benefit would increase because she would switch over to the survivor benefit. So those are Beth's income sources. The next thing we looked at was savings. So Beth's 401k, she was saving 7% to her 401k. She received a 3% match on that, so 10% total contribution to her 401k. And then Beth had a Roth IRA that she was contributing $7,500 per year to as well. So that's a snapshot of where Beth is today. Her goals, how long she wants to work, what her income sources are. the first thing I always like to do in any planning trajectory is see, what are you currently on track for? Before we make changes and adjustments, what are you currently tracking for? And to do that, what we did is we went to this page right here. What this page shows us here is what income sources and expenses will you have over the course of your lifetime. So today her income is broken down, it's salary of course today, but she's gonna stop working at age 67. Once she stops working, her Social Security benefit will kick in and that becomes her new income source. So we see what her income will be, and if we fast forward to retirement, we wanna compare what will this income be. So again, all of this is Social Security. Compare that to her expenses. Now here's a breakdown of her expenses. Her living expenses in today's dollars are $6,000 per month, which is $72,000 per year. These living expenses right here is a $72,000 per year, but adjusted for inflation. Now that's the $6,000 per year or per month that Beth wants to live on. That's after she's paid the housing bill. So what you can see here with housing is here's what her mortgage payment and property taxes are. So she's got great equity in her home, but it's also really expensive. Her total housing bill is close to $60,000 per year, and that's an additional expense that she would need to maintain at least until the home is paid off. Then we have healthcare as well on top of that. So what would her expenses be for Part B and D premiums as well as expected annual out-of-pocket expenses? So when we look at basic living expenses plus housing plus healthcare, those are Beth's total expenses before we add in goals on top of that. What are the goals? Well, the goals are as follows. If you recall, Beth wants to have $20,000 per year to travel. She wants to be able to get back and forth to Tennessee to see children and grandchildren. She wants to be able to take vacations when she wants to travel. So we're budgeting $20,000 per year for her to do so. And then gift. The gift here is funding grandkids' college plans. So at $3,000 per child per year, 3 grandchildren, that's $9,000, but that's not gonna go on forever. That's gonna go until grandkids start college, and then that goes away. She also needs to budget for a new car every so often. So here's what those extra goals are. And as we see that, here's Beth's normal expenses. So basics plus housing plus healthcare plus her goals. So funding 529 plans or college plans, funding travel, and then every so often buying a new car. And then here's projected tax payments. When you add all those up, Beth's expenses were pretty high. Now, this is sometimes surprising for a lot of people. They say, geez, all I wanted to do was live on $6,000 per month. Well, when you add on house payments, when you add on travel, when you add on funding grandchildren's college plans, when you add on these other things, add on taxes, these numbers get pretty high. So what we did for Beth is we said, here's how much you want to be able to spend. $272,000 per year and increasing over time. We then compared that to say, here's how much income you have coming in from Social Security. Beth, here's how much would need to come from your portfolio to support that. So if your expenses are here and Social Security is here, there's a gap. That gap needs to come from your portfolio. Well, how much does that represent? How much are you taking out of your portfolio in that scenario? So what this page shows here is this shows the projected withdrawal rate Beth would need to take out. She would need to withdraw 9+% per year of her portfolio and then more from her portfolio. Why is this year higher? Well, she needs to buy a car in this year. And then her portfolio withdrawal rate stays elevated and she essentially is on track to run out of money. You can see that in this graph here. Here's Beth's portfolio today. She saves and grows and saves and grows. She retires at 67. And then she starts to spend down her money. Now, when we looked at this wasn't super encouraging to Beth. Now, where her mind went was, oh gosh, I guess I'll work forever, or I guess I'll have to save even more, or I guess I just won't be able to see my grandchildren as much as I wanted to. That's where her mind went. But I said, Beth, hold on a second. Let's look at the bigger picture before we start jumping into possible solutions here. This is just showing your liquid assets. So your IRA, your Roth IRA, your 401k, your cash, and yeah, this isn't super encouraging. You're not projected to have a whole lot of that forever. But what if we look at your net worth instead? Your net worth, including all the equity in your home. Well, look at that. Even though she's projected to run out of money by 80 or 81 when we look at liquid assets, she's projected to have a high degree of net worth here inside of her overall plan. Why is that? Well, she has a home with a lot of equity. Now, I assumed a 5% growth rate on her home value in this situation. She lives in a part of Southern California where that's what it's been historically. No guarantee that happens, but at least as we're looking at this, we saw it's not as if you're broke, although you don't have any more liquid assets. So what are some of the solutions here? So I started talking to Beth and I said, Beth, this isn't an asset problem, it's a liquidity problem. You have the assets, you have the value. We can see that right here on this chart. The problem is liquidity. Now let me run something by you, Beth. You were planning on staying in Southern California because as of a few years ago, that was your plan with your now ex-husband. His job was going to keep him in Southern California, but the goal was to be close to children and grandchildren. They're in Tennessee. They're not in California right now. And I know you love walking on the beach. I know how much that means to you. But when I talk to you, everything that keeps coming up is how much family is important to you. What if, conceptually, we at least explored options of either turning California into a rental, and then you take that income and you rent in Tennessee, or potentially selling California. Now, we worked through it in several conversations, and what she ultimately determined is the cash flow she could expect from her rental property wasn't worth it to her, nor was the liability of being a landlord across the country, and she really didn't want to have to get a property management company involved. Not the case for everyone, but at least in Beth's case. Now, what we looked at after that was, Beth, what would this look like if you potentially sold California? And here's some of the first and second and third order effects that had. We looked at this and said, well, what if you sold your home? You downsized and you bought a home in Tennessee. Now, she did a lot of research before actually doing this, and I'm condensing a few meetings into just one analysis here. She ultimately went out there for a period of time. She found that she loved Tennessee. She found a neighborhood close to her children that she just really loved, and she found a home that she loved for about $600,000. So far less expensive than what her home here in California was worth. So when we looked at that, we said, Beth, if you sell your home, now all of a sudden, here's what your liquid assets look like. So again, what she would do in this scenario, sell California, pay off the mortgage, pay some in taxes, use the proceeds to buy a $600,000 home in Tennessee cash, and she would still have $600,000-$700,000 or so liquid that she could then invest to create income. Now all of a sudden, if you look at her actual net worth isn't that dramatically different from the previous scenario, but if you just look at invested assets, aka liquidity, the new solution, she has far more money in her portfolio and is able to meet all of her needs. Now here's some of the second order effects of this. It's not just the fact that you unlocked this equity in her home. What she also did was she decreased her state taxes. Her average tax rate in California would have been about 5% over the course of retirement. Tennessee, that went away. So 5% off the bat. Her property taxes dropped by about $13,000 per year. So that's an expense that now has gone away. Now on top of that, we said, Beth, you could do everything you want to do in Tennessee that you love doing here in California, with the exception of course of the beach, but your overall cost of living, $6,000 is what it would be needed in California where you're currently living. But if we adjust for cost of living adjustments, just because there's lower cost of living, $5,500 per month would more than offset what you could do here for $6,000 per month. So as we start to look at that, all of these things started adding up to where we said, Beth, not only is this doable, but this is doable in a way that's maybe more beneficial for you than what we previously planned on. Now, another benefit here. I said, Beth, this $20,000 right here, we planned that number because that would allow you to fly out to Tennessee whenever you want. Here's the thing. You're going to live in Tennessee. Yes, you're still going to travel and take trips, but you're not going to need that full $20,000, at least not for the travel that we laid out with Beth. Here's the thing though, Beth. I don't want you to decrease this $20,000. In fact, now that we see there's so much extra you have in your plan, I want to explore what does this look like if you potentially retire earlier, and what if you even spend more on travel in retirement so that you know whenever you miss the beach, whenever you miss friends in California, you can get a plane ticket, get a place out here, and still fully experience that. So let's actually increase our travel budget, retire a couple years earlier, and if we do that, what we can start to see here is you're still in a really comfortable position. So here's one of the biggest mistakes I see, and this is highlighting it, is a lot of single women that were previously married and are now either widowed or divorced, is they had a plan and it was with their ex-spouse. And now that they're no longer married, that plan is still kind of the plan in their head, but it's because they haven't gone back to the drawing board. They haven't said, what does life now look like for me? If I'm going to invent what I want retirement to look like, where would I start? And what we saw in Beth's case is by better aligning her resources and her assets with her actual retirement goals, It freed up a huge number of possibilities. That was retiring earlier, spending more time with kids and grandkids, having more margin to travel and to live and do the things you wanted to do. Now, practically speaking, once we saw this, and once we saw, yes, this is the best move for Beth to actually move to Tennessee, there's practical implications. Hey, Beth, number one, let's stop doing the Roth contributions. You're in California today, you're gonna be in the highest tax bracket you'll likely be in for the rest of your life, both because of your income and because of California taxes. Let's shift that $7,500 to your Roth into your 401k for a pre-tax deduction, and we'll pay less taxes when it comes out in retirement, both in a lower tax bracket and in a state where you're not paying such high taxes. Number two, Beth, there's likely going to be a Social Security strategy that we need to implement for you. Whether it's a spousal benefit or future survivor benefit, we're not going to wait around for your ex-spouse to pass away, but we do know that he's not in the greatest health and that should he pass, we will immediately move over to a survivor benefit, which will increase your income floor by about $1,000 to $1,500 per month. Then there's the investment implications of we now have a lot more money to support our needs and there's less expenses because property taxes are lower, living expenses are lower, state taxes are lower. So your investment allocation needs to be positioned differently for this scenario than it was previously. So as you start to go through this planning scenario by making sure that your objectives are right from the beginning, it's no longer your plan with your ex-spouse, it's now your plan. What that starts to do is it causes this waterfall effect of new planning opportunities or new planning points that you can begin to work through. So I hope that was helpful to see a case study for a single person, particularly a single woman. Now, when I'm looking at this, I'm kind of assuming traditional withdrawal rates here. That being said, there are multiple different ways that you can create income in retirement. If you're wondering what are those options for me as I'm approaching retirement, I made this video here. And in this video, I talk about 4 different ways that you can create income in retirement so that you can find the way that works best for you. Once again, I'm James Conole, founder of Root Financial. And if you're interested in seeing how we help our clients at Root Financial get the most out of life with their money, be sure to visit us at www.rootfinancialpartners.com.